I've just spent a couple of days four-wheel driving with the Ford Ranger Wildtrax X. I got to take two identical vehicles off-road. So in this video I'm going to unpack what do I think of the Ford Ranger Wildtrax X off-road. I've been out filming a video for Maxxis Tyres Australia to see what difference tyre size makes to a vehicle off-road and on-road. Now that's a totally different video. This video is one where I want to understand and give you content around how does this vehicle perform off-road. What do I think about it? What did I find is good? What do I find is bad? The reason I mention the Maxxis element is because this vehicle was running a 295 70 R17 tyre and the other vehicle was running a 265 65 17. So two different tyre sizes. And it does have an effect off-road, which I'll talk to a little bit in this video. But primarily, I'm just going to focus on how I thought this vehicle went off-road. I get to drive a lot of different four-wheel drives off-road. And what I find with the modern four-wheel drives is that generally they all come into sort of a space where they all kind of perform somewhat the same. And oftentimes when we're talking about the dual cab utes, it's because they're leaf sprung rear end, IFS front end. Some of them obviously are coil spring in the rear end, and when they come off the factory floor, off-road I find that they're all inside a sort of a similar space. So a lot of this conversation really is trying to find those tiny little edges which make a difference. Now, if I had to live with one of these, say it was my company car, there would be no complaints. It's a very comfortable car to live in. It's comfortable on-road, not that I'm talking so much about that. But off-road, when I hit the dirt, it did the job great. It rode well, it was handling. I picked up a bit of speed and traveled over some high-speed dirt and hitting those bumps and all of that, it did the job. I did tend to feel a little bit of a harshness coming into the vehicle, especially with the vehicle that was running the 295 tyre. So if I was running that size, larger size tyre on this vehicle off-road, I'd be inclined to run a slightly lower pressure. We were set on 20 PSI, so I'd probably default to something like an 18 PSI for an empty vehicle. Obviously, as you make the vehicle heavier, you need to bring your tyre pressures up. So that was the high speed. It was pretty good. When you came through corners, it wasn't stepping out on you when you hit potholes. It didn't do anything unpredictable. It did what you wanted it to do, and it was a pleasant experience. When we got into the hardcore off-roading, where we're looking for climbing rock steps and that, the electronics inside the vehicle, like it's got a rock crawling mode, that was cool. You can put that on, it automatically flicks the diff lock on, and you could climb into the terrain and climb up rock steps and all that. What I really appreciate is my four-wheel driving tends to be very slow and controlled. I look for the traction, I follow the traction, and I get through the obstacle. That's how I like to wheel. I'm not into dialing numbers and wheel spinning for days, because that just breaks components and rips up the trails. So I really liked that the vehicle allowed me to drive the vehicle in that way. I find with some of the more modern vehicles, their turbo lag will be really lazy, and you're trying to get the power on and the turbos slowly spool up, and then all of a sudden you've got more power than you want, and it becomes unpredictable. Whereas the Wildtrax X allowed me to do that. The other thing it allowed me to do was left foot brake. So I like in those environments to be using the left foot on the brake and my right foot on the accelerator, and I modulate the vehicle and control the power through that means. And it means that I get the drive when I want it and I can stop when I want it. All of those features, the vehicle allowed me to do it, and I like that. I want to be in control of the vehicle. Generally speaking, I don't like too much of the computer doing the work, but I think they've got a really nice balance of that. The other feature I used a fair bit was the turn assist. That's really good fun, and in a lot of the trails we were trying to turn around to go and do a retake of the chute or whatever, and I'd flick that on and oh yeah, it would absolutely help you get around the corner. So I wound up using that quite a bit because it was cool, but it literally helped me turn corners a lot better. It's basically what it's doing is it's using the brakes on the inside tyre to apply the brakes just to help the vehicle turn. Yeah, really cool feature. It's got another feature in the vehicle, which is it's kind of like an off-road cruise control. Basically, you can set the speed of the vehicle, I think it was 15 k's an hour or 20 k's an hour on a cruise control, and it will just drive itself through the obstacles at the speed you set. Now you can override that by tapping the brakes or accelerating and do what you need to do. I set it on like a speed of like 2 k's an hour and then went up a gentle rocky climb with rock steps, just small stuff. And it absolutely just got there to find a rock step and then slowly would apply the power and climb up the rock step, back off. It was really cool. I don't know how much I would actually use it off-road, but it was a cool feature, and I can certainly see there'd be times where you want to use that feature in an off-road environment. So the Wildtrax X's we've taken on the trip are both the bi-turbo, so that's a 2-litre 4-cylinder motor. On-road, it does the job. It's not exciting, but it does the job. We got up to 100 kilometres an hour in about 16.5 seconds on the 295 size tyres, and fuel economy wise we returned about 13.5 litres per 100 on driving open country road, windy country road, freeway and a lot of off-road. So yeah, I'll leave other people to tell you all about that sort of stuff. Let's just keep focusing in on the off-road ability. I got to a set of rock steps and I knew that these vehicles wouldn't have the capability of getting up the rock steps. They were really quite extreme, but I knew that the vehicles would have a chance to get into the rock steps. So it'd be a gauge of how far into this sort of space can I push it, and then I'd use every traction aid and computer the vehicle has and every skill I had to try and work out and see how far I could push the vehicle into that environment. And I was pleasantly surprised how far I could get the vehicle up the rock steps. At the end of the day, it just came down to lack of traction, and I wasn't prepared to start going into some of the more aggressive driving styles of really popping the vehicle up rock steps and that, just purely because these are a media release car and brand new, and I don't want to be that guy that returns a broken Ford Ranger to Ford and says, "Oh, well, you fix it." They might give me the bill. The vehicle has got cameras all around it like many of these modern vehicles do. So you can get the view, and it's kind of like that computer generated over the top view, and you look down around the vehicle and sort of get a sense of what you're looking at. I didn't find it accurate enough imagery to really help me. The cameras forward and back were a little bit better for use, like when you're reversing back you can kind of gauge, you know, where the obstacle is. But I find oftentimes off-road, you know, I'm needing to back up to something like that close to make a turn or do whatever I'm doing. The cameras didn't really give me the accuracy I felt I wanted. The front camera, which you can switch so it's on pretty much all the time, it was helpful. And there were times where I'm like, I couldn't see over an embankment that I was dropping into, so you could look at the camera, oh yeah, there's a track down there, there's no rock or hole or something like that. I did find that a feature I used a couple of times, so it was a cool feature. Is it essential? No, I don't think so. I've been driving without that sort of feature for years, so an interesting feature to have though. So these vehicles are a bi-turbo, the 2-litre 4-cylinder diesel engine, and its automatic transmission, which has got a 10-speed auto in it, so you can manually select through the different gears. I did use that a little bit off-road. You can select manual mode and then you can select what gear you want it to be in, and you can say, I don't want you to go above a certain gear. So you might say, I don't want you to go above 5th gear, and it'll just use the lower gears in the box until it runs out of revs. So there's kind of features in there, but I found them a little bit clunky to get into, you know, button push, 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 and then you're where you want to go. When I'm off-road, and I'm kind of like, I just want to have muscle memory, go bang, I've got what I need. Same with the diff lock, accessing the rear diff lock. The feature gives you lots of chances to get in and change it in different parameters. Depending on you're doing mud and rock, it'll automatically turn it on, but if you want to turn it off, you can. All of that's really good. But it's the button on the touch screen, and when you're moving and you want the locker to come off all of a sudden while you're moving, it's kind of hard to grab the button, and it's also on the other side of center on the center console. So a few things like that, I kind of want a more tactile button. I don't know if you could rejig the system to use the overhead auxiliary switches. It's got 6 of them up there. That's really cool. Again, I find overhead switches for me aren't the greatest thing because you've got to look at them to see which one. Unless they're really distinctly different switches for a tactile and you go, ah, there's that button, then you're kind of up there, oh, which one? If you're on the move, it's no good to me. I don't find them any good at all. And the other thing is when you're moving, trying to have your hand up there to find something until you can grab it is a pain. So the process to find and use those switches is going to be hand up, find the switches, 1, 2, 3. That's third switch is my diff lock or my spotlight or whatever. I just don't rate that system at all. I like things down where I can kind of see them and go bang and keep driving. That's just a personal preference. From a clearance perspective, I found that the approach angle was superb. I very rarely contacted the front of the vehicle, same with the rear, the departure angle, and ramp over for the vehicles they are was sufficient. I pushed the limits a few times on all of those elements and I found the limits, but it was certainly very usable off-road. So what do I think at the end of the day? I'd live with a Wildtrax X. If I was working for a company and they said, Matt, there's your company car, I'd be happy. It's a pleasant ride on road. It's got lots of bling and features in there, but you know, it's relatively simple to navigate. It's intuitive, I like that. But off-road, it does the job. You're definitely going to be able to get to most four-wheel drive destinations, when we're not talking extreme stuff, but most four-wheel drive destinations with a Wildtrax in a standard sort of trim. Probably the only thing, if you're going to start pushing the limits a bit more, you would want some suspension lift. You'd probably go for the 295 larger tyre. You'd probably want some more substantial rock sliders, although these did take a bit of a hit a few times and never suffered any damage. They were slow, just sort of sliding over wombat hole sort of skids. So from a protection point of view, the vehicle's got everything that you could possibly need straight out of the box. But obviously we all like modifying our vehicles, so there you go. I hope you've enjoyed checking out the Wildtrax X. That's my opinion. I'm Mad Matt. Stay safe on the trails.